Hey everyone, I wanted to make a little bit of a video today about Artifact. I know some of you won't really care about that, that's okay. Feel free not to watch, I won't be too sad about that. But yeah, I just wanted to also give a bit of a disclaimer before I get into the nitty-gritty of this stuff. This isn't a video about me leaving the game or anything, I'm going to still stream it. I do enjoy Artifact, but I did want to talk about, a lot of the issues the game has, what could improve with it, and all that good stuff. So yeah, let's just talk about the first and the rest of the problems with the game, shall we? So, pretty much the first issue is the game costing money to play, the economy of the game, and sort of all the bad negative associations that go with that, and that Artifact now has to sort of carry probably forever. So the game, costs money up front to play. It's like $20, and then you get a little bit of playtime out of that, and you maybe have to pay more if you want to play prized expert modes, whatever, to then potentially win packs which you can sell cards from. Now, I don't think the economy is particularly unfair. In reality, I understand that the principle is you don't want to have to pay money and then pay to play afterwards. That feels really crappy. And probably if I wasn't, a professional card game boy, I would also be looking into Artifact as a kind of greedy cash grab thing. Wouldn't want anything to do with it. And that stigma is definitely, understandable, I think. So yeah, Valve has kind of messed up there a little bit on what they've done, but in reality, I don't think this is like a core issue of the game that's making it less fun or less accessible to people even. It's probably cheaper as a game than quite a few other card games out there. Things like Hearthstone and Magic and whatnot. But either way, I mean, Valve should maybe make the game free to play if they want to encourage more people to play who are, initially put off by that barrier to entry in the $20 price tag. So yeah, that's the first issue. It's not for me a huge issue, and I know for some people it is a big like principal issue rather than actually the economy being too unfair. But okay, so what are the real like actual problems that this game has that making it not appeal to a lot of people other than the monetization? Well, I think the biggest issue probably is how fun the game actually is and how addictive it is, how enjoyable it is, how good it feels to play. What I mean by this is, as a new player playing Artifact, and even getting into the game, like, having played quite a lot of hours, the game can feel kind of not fun at times. It feels like you're not really playing a game. You're just kind of like grinding through this sort of situation. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, what I'm saying is a lot of games they can feel like a bit of a grind to the end. You're just slowly getting a victory. You're making some little decisions here and there, and it doesn't necessarily even feel like you're having that much of an impact in the game. You're just watching some stuff happen. Yeah, there are some games that feel more like you have decision making and purpose in the game, and there are others where you don't feel that as much. But as a new player, especially, I think this is really a big thing because it's so hard to grasp with Artifact with all these different mechanics to other card games, and it's like quite unique in the concept and the execution of that concept. It can be quite daunting and hard to understand. Like, why the hell am I losing a game? Like, why am I winning? What wins me a game? Like, I know I have to kill 2 towers, but how am I supposed to get there? And I distinctly remember having, a very difficult time getting my head around like what am I supposed to be doing in this game. Yeah, I understand card games. I get the point of value and like mana cost and all this stuff, but in reality, it can be really hard to kind of execute that into a game plan. And even at the higher levels, the game plan becomes it's not quite like it would be in other card games. You maybe play on curve, you just saving your control spells or whatever. You do some of that in Artifact, but you're also doing a bit of it's like a mixture of a lot of stuff. And I think that sort of just core gameplay is difficult to grapple with, like just in a sense of how do I have fun from doing this activity? You know what I mean? Um, and yeah, I mean, for some people, the game is going to be like very, very entertaining. They're going to have a lot of satisfaction from playing it. But in reality, I do find myself sometimes playing a game of Artifact out and just feeling like, well, I mean, okay, that was a game of Artifact. Where was the fun in that game, you know? Um, Whereas in maybe something like Hearthstone or whatever, you're like playing your guys and it feels good and blah blah blah. So I'm not really sure how to sort of. I don't think I have a solution to this problem because it's quite a subjective thing, and I think other streamers have even talked about this, I believe, or YouTubers or whatever. I think like Reynad and Noxious have brought this stuff up about Artifact. It's that it's just kind of not addictive. It's not fun. You don't necessarily feel like you want to play another game, especially when you're a new player. the game can really put you off quite easily, I think. Um, so that's a really big problem, yeah, for new players and even for players like me who are still playing the game and enjoying it. I do play sometimes a game out, and it just doesn't feel great. And this kind of leads me on to another problem, which is um, maybe not so much of a problem, but especially in draft, I find that some games go very, very long and drawn out. I found myself playing one draft with a particular set of heroes that and cards that effectively made the games really, really long because it was a lot of stalling cards and just sort of stalling lanes out, clogging the board up, and then waiting until like a very late turn to actually win the game. Um, and yeah, it just doesn't feel as satisfying as maybe some other games, especially when you lose. And that's another thing. Like if you're losing these drawn out games or these sort of grindy games, they just feel like a bit of a grind sometimes, rather than a game that you're, playing and enjoying, and it's dynamic and like all this stuff's happening and whatnot. Um, and yeah, so basically what I'm saying is game can be not fun sometimes. I mean, most games can also, have this problem, but Artifact, I think, especially struggles from this. For new players, it's even more of an issue. Um, Okay, so yeah, I think the game itself might have some problems just in terms of grabbing people and grabbing their attention. Like it's very deep and complex, but it's also maybe not immediately fun, or to find it fun, you have to really invest a lot of time into it and understand the sort of subtleties on what's going on. But yeah, there's also issues with when you get into the game more, some of the problems it has, which I'll talk about now. So the next kind of problem I have, yeah, I don't have, sorry, I don't have a solution for that. I think that's just a problem with the game, and I'm not sure. I think as a result, Artifact will probably never really be big time mainstream successful on the level of Hearthstone, on the level of Magic. I'm not sure though. I mean, don't quote me on this when it's like the biggest game or whatever in many years' time. But okay, so what's the next problem? Well, probably RNG, right? Randomness in the game. Um, Now, I know a lot of people are divided on this topic. I'm in the camp of a lot of the RNG in the game isn't bad. It's good RNG. You can control a lot of the stuff going on. You can react to things that happen that don't go in your favor and things that happen that do go in your favor or could go in your favor. You can play around placements and arrows to a certain extent of your creeps and whatnot, and even your creeps spawning in different lanes, you can react and go into whatever lane you need to go into as a result of the creep spawns. So a lot of the RNG isn't bad, and in fact it makes the games feel a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more fun. You get to make these decisions that are varied and not the same and playing out the same every game. But what is the problem with RNG? Well, for me, I think there's a few issues. The first is that some of the cards are still a little bit like they changed cheating death, which was commonly denounced as probably the worst design card like ever. Maybe in a lot of card games, as well as Artifact, but definitely in Artifact, bad design and just very like coin flip card, 50% chance and your guys survive basically was the idea. But it's gone now, so they've changed that. But there are still a few cards that just have this kind of mentality behind it, and that suffer from that as a result. And I'm talking about things like Ogre Magi. I'm talking about Bounty Hunter. There's a few other heroes that aren't as much of an issue, but there's a couple of cards in there that are still showing a little bit of a flawed design philosophy, I think, in my opinion. And that could even, be a thing going forward, depending on whether they do new expansions and whatnot, if they haven't learnt their lesson about just don't put 50/50s on cards, because it's not really great fun, right? Whether or not the card is balanced or not, that's another thing. But if you're just flipping a coin and then seeing an effect go off or not, number one, I mean, it doesn't feel very interesting or inspiring. You don't have any control over that. You don't get to interact with that at all, and it just feels really crappy when it either goes your way or doesn't go your way, depending on who you are, who you're playing, and whatnot. So, yeah, basically, I think they should change some of the cards that are still a little bit, terrible, and they should really just avoid the direction of printing straight RNG on cards because it just feels so bad to play with, whether or not it's balanced or too strong, whatever. So that's the first problem with RNG and random stuff. The next is one for me is card draw in particular. I think this is only really a big problem for constructed play, but a lot of games and matchups, not even matchups, but games can just feel like you kind of got snowballed out of the game too early because your opponent had a lot of their early tempo, a lot of their early game cards, and you didn't have yours, so you couldn't really react and deal with that stuff. And I mean, some decks are worse at this than others. Like if you're maybe playing a control deck and you can't respond to an aggro deck, then you just get completely wiped out. And this isn't a problem, specific to Artifact. I think this happens in a lot of card games, Magic, Hearthstone in particular. If you curve out and your opponent doesn't, you're just a huge favorite to win in a lot of situations. Now this might not be to such a great extent in Artifact, but the thing that really makes it bad for me is there's no mulligan system at all in Artifact. There are mulligan systems in pretty much every other card game. I can't even think of a card game that doesn't have mulligans right now. Original Magic didn't, but I mean, come on, it's 2019. Mulligan systems, it just kind of helps to even out the game and make the game more balanced and not have one player starting off on a kind of a foot above the other player for no reason. Now, yeah, I think obviously to fix this they could put a mulligan in. Now, there's obviously a little bit of a problem with this. The main one is actually matchups that are binary already. Stuff like aggro versus control is the common example, maybe, or whatever, or your mid range versus your control. Like whoever's favored there, if you add mulligans in, the favored matchup becomes even more favored because you're going to guarantee your cards, that win that matchup more often in your hand. So that is a valid, criticism of having mulligans, but honestly, I wouldn't mind it. I think it would definitely help reduce the sort of randomness in the game. And yes, okay, then you have randomness in the matchups, but at the end of the day, the meta is there to sort of balance out the matchups and work out what deck is good against what, and then maybe you can put in techs that help matchups, and maybe in tournaments you can play multiple decks rather than just one, and all this different stuff to sort of make that less of an issue. And even the RNG within the game can help, still to alleviate the matchup binarity. Can I say that? Whatever. The binary matchups, right? It can help with that. The creep spawns, the hero placements, all this other stuff. If the card draw is more consistent, it just feels like you have more control over the game. You have more control over your game plan. Otherwise, yeah, you're just seeing what cards are in your hand. Okay, I can play some early on, or I can't. Okay, I can't. Well, I'm already at a disadvantage. Okay, whatever. So that's a problem for me, and whether or not it's like a problem, in terms of balance, or yeah, I know, like some games you're gonna win because you drew well and your opponent didn't, and it balances out, right? But for me, it's a feeling of kind of hopelessness and not being able to do anything, and I don't like that feeling. I think a lot of people also don't like that feeling of getting like completely messed over by RNG and not having a chance in a game. Now, yeah. Maybe it doesn't happen like in a lot of games, but when it does, it feels really bad. So mulligans would be nice. Now, just generally speaking, in the games, there is so much RNG. It's kind of you could go like for a long time describing all the RNG moments that happen in a game. There's so many. And as I said, a lot of this stuff isn't bad RNG. Like you can play around it, and it in fact probably helps to make the games more varied and whatnot. But it does still cause a bit of a problem, and that is whenever you finish a game of Artifact, especially when you lose, or when you win, even when you win, you can always point to specific situations or parts in the game where if one thing had gone differently, you would have won, or if one thing had gone differently, you would have lost. And so many of these things are just outside of your control. And that kind of, I think, when you look back on a game, or even when you're in a game in the moment and you see something go wrong for you, you can be like, well, if that went right, I would be in such a better position. And whether or not, these little RNG moments have a big impact on the game, or whether you could have won by playing better, that's not really the point here. It's not that you maybe misplayed and that's also why you lost, not just this RNG moment. Um, it's more the point that the RNG moments do add up. They do kind of weigh on your mind, and they make you think, well, why am I playing if I could have just played the same way I did and won if this had gone differently. I could have played better and still lost because of this happening or whatever. Um, so yeah, and I think especially as people improve at the game and once there's less misplays, maybe, um, yeah, it becomes even more of an issue, right? Because people are like, well, I played what I consider to be perfectly, and I still lost, and this is why there was this happening and this happening. My hero died at this point in the game to no fault of my own. My opponent drew their good cards. The creeps went here, and yeah, it just leads to an overall feeling of lack of control in the game. You don't really have an impact on what happens. And I think that's the main issue with randomness. You just feel like you don't have an impact, you don't have any say in the game sometimes. Or not that, sorry, that's a bit maybe extreme. It's more that things could have gone differently in your favor or not in your favor, and that's something you can't control, and that feeling of that lack of control does decide games. It just feels crappy, even if, in reality, you don't really lose because of these things, but because of technical misplays or whatever. Yeah, it's just that kind of bad feeling again of getting screwed by randomness. So yeah, I don't know if they can fix that because stuff like creep placement, hero placement is really integral to the game, and it's kind of a core part of it, that being random. So apart from fixing, a mulligan in the game, putting a mulligan to fix draw RNG, and putting in what was the other one? Fixing RNG cards that are in the game right now, like Ogre Magi or whatever. Apart from that stuff, there's I don't know, not much they can do to alleviate that problem. I mean, people have suggested stuff like, I don't know, adding in like buying creep spawns or whatever, but it just gets too complex, I think, and it's not a good solution. There are a couple of other things that I would like to talk about in terms of RNG, and firstly, one is in draft especially. I feel like there should be a deck tracker in draft like there was previously, that allows you to see your opponent's deck. I don't really know why that was taken out. I think some people in the community didn't like it or whatever on Reddit, and as a result it got taken out. But effectively, by having a deck tracker, you kind of reduce the RNG in draft of like playing around a card but then getting screwed by your opponent randomly having a card effectively. Stuff like Annihilation is a really big problem in draft. Okay, like every maybe 1 in 10 games, 1 in 20 maybe, you will lose just because your opponent had Annihilation. You didn't play around it because it doesn't make sense to. And that's just such a terrible feeling. It's like, well, am I going to play around the card that he might have like 10% of the time, or am I going to play for the other correct line and get punished as a result because he randomly drafted it? So yeah, I think deck tracker and draft would help that. Yeah, and also in draft, I mean, the hero RNG in the flop when your heroes go down, or hero placements in general, feels pretty bad because of the gold gain snowball more than anything else. If your heroes die early, your opponent gains gold. They can buy items to improve their heroes, which keeps them alive, and all this stuff. I don't know how you fix that. Okay, maybe that's just a problem with draft. Yeah, whatever. Some of these RNG things you can't really change, but what they can change, I feel like they probably should, to just help with those, feelings of pain and all that. So the next thing is kind of the game feeling meaningless in many ways. And this is probably due to not having a proper sort of ranked system or competitive system. And I know other people have um, voiced concerns about this, but pretty much the system that the Artifact has right now is not cutting it. I'm sure they'll upgrade it at some point, but compare it to Gwent, where I can log on to Gwent, I can play ranked, I can get to pro ladder. Once I'm at pro ladder, I can just play games, I can climb, I can maybe eventually get to the top 6 players in the world, and then I can go to a tournament, I can win money, I can get fame and glory, and all that great stuff. In Artifact, there's nothing like that. I mean, maybe there will be in the future, but the current matchmaking system doesn't even really match you with people of the same skill. At least at the ranks I'm at, it seems like it's completely arbitrary, like who I'm facing. Some players play very well, some players play very poorly, some players build great decks, some players build bad decks, whatever. And I think that may be because there's not too many people playing, it's difficult for them to. And they also have such a large range of ranks in the ranking system. It's 1 to 75, which is more than your typical, I don't know, 1 to 20 or, yeah, 1 to 25, Hearthstone, whatever. So yeah, basically they need a better matchmaking system which actually puts you against people with similar skill, and that system should not be rewarding to a huge extent quantity over quality of play, which I feel like right now it maybe does, especially at below maybe rank 70 or whatever. I haven't got to the super high ranks, so this might become irrelevant when people get there en masse. But the time they do that, they've probably not had a great experience climbing, is what I'm going to say. The climbing feels pointless, so why would they continue climbing, even if it is to reach the ranks where it then becomes meaningful? So yeah, something needs to be done about that progression system because it just doesn't feel very good. And also this leads into the next problem with Artifact, which is right now there's no, yeah, I mean, if there's no ladder that's meaningful, there's no tournaments that are meaningful, right? Because, well, I mean, there are, okay, that's maybe an overstatement. Um, you can qualify for stuff through playing tournaments as well, but there's no ladder qualification. I think ladder qualification's kind of nice to have in a game, because winning consistently qualification tournaments are it's a little bit tricky to do, let's put it that way. Tournament performance is very inconsistent when you're playing against what should be the best players in a qualification tournament, right? Your win rate, in theory, should be kind of going down quite a lot. And then if you're playing like an equal skill player, obviously the variables such as randomness and who got luckier, who did this and that, and, yeah, it all becomes a little bit more impactful. So the point is, yeah, ladder system would be great in addition to qualification tournaments, or just, yeah, a mixture of both. Sure, why not? I think at the moment there's a lot of invites happening because, yeah, I mean, the famous people, are they really going to play like an X amount of hours qualification tournament where they have a pretty low chance of winning? I know I've skipped like multiple qualifier tournaments, like, um, I have been busy, but also it's like, well, what are my chances of winning this really? I mean, they might be decently high, but I have to win a tournament just to go to a tournament, which I maybe won't then even win. Like, it feels kind of crappy. Whereas if you just allow people to grind their games, play the game as they would normally during the day or whatever, and eventually get to a tournament that way, then that feels a lot better, I think. Um, Not just for me, but for other people, hopefully. Okay, I think that's pretty much the problems with Artifact. There's probably a couple stuff I'm forgetting, but whatever. That was my brain juice going all over the webcam or whatever, into the internet, the hive mind. And yeah, let me know what you think. If you care about Artifact at all, let me know what you think they should do to change the game, improve the game, if they should do anything at all. Tell me how I'm wrong. I will happily read your comment and and laugh at you. No, I'm joking. Um, but yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I will I'll see you in the next video. Bye.